thank Chair Walsh for coming and being available to answer any questions. I brought this forth to the Legislative Committee because I feel that the Board of Education needs to get more involved with ZRAs that can be potentially impactful to our enrollment and our capacity. And this bill that Ms. Walsh has filed speaks to that in the time period leading up to the general plan, and that's what the county is undergoing right now, is the next 10 years, development in the next 10 years, and the school system has a vested interest in that. So if any of my colleagues, we had several questions at our committee meeting, and so Ms. Walsh is here to answer your questions, address concerns, and see how this relates to the Board of Education.
Member Catronio summarized it quite well. This is a bill that is relevant because of the context of the general plan that Howard County government is undergoing now. I think the last time actually that I appeared or at least attended a legislative committee meeting of yours was when we were trying to get a better handle on land reservation for schools. And what the council has run into on the legislative side since then, despite best efforts by some of my other colleagues actually, is that we can't actually legislate much more than what we have in the code now, which was as part of a review process, county government is to think about things like where would schools possibly be sited on some of these very largest developments and what can be done on the front end of those developments to make room for the schools that the new children that would live in those homes would need. And so this was kind of the reverse of it, which is if we can't legislate it, then the place that we need to address it, we're told by the Director of Department of Planning and Zoning, is in this general plan process. And so that means that all of us, not just the Board of Education, but all of us should be invested in that ongoing process right now. It's HOCO by design. Just this week, in fact, at 7 o'clock tonight, is the fourth in a series of public meetings that they're having to gain public input. But I will tell you from the very beginning of that process, before even a consultant was hired, each of the 5 council members implored Department of Planning and Zoning and the executive, its administration, to put schools at the forefront of planning, that we are always in a reactive mode based on what's gone down in the last decade or more of development in this county. And the only way that we can reverse that is to center schools planning along with all of the other infrastructure and private development that we allow to continue in this county. So if the focus where we're going to make sure that we have provision for schools is in the general plan and not specific amendments to or new legislation, then what this bill aims to do is say, look, we're a year away from a new general plan. And in the midst of this council continues to receive what is known as zoning regulation amendments. And they are proposed changes to the zoning regulations that tend to have a sweeping impact because it's not specific to one given property, but rather extends to any property that's zoned comparably. And where that's really had the greatest impact in terms of student yields is in what's known as the CAC zoning district, community activity corridor, I think. And those are all along Route 1. In my district, D1, they tend to be the River Watches and the Elk Ridge Crossing, but as you go further south, down Route 1, then you're talking about places like Blue Stream and Howard Square. And those are the kind of developments, those massive developments that singularly can bust every student yield projection that we see and result in things like a Hanover Hills or Duckett's Lane being at or near capacity the very day they're open. We can't account for the busts that those massive projects and the students that they yield push into our school system in a pretty rapid succession. And so what we've seen in the council, just actually in the last year, we didn't get so many of them in our first year, but in the last year and a half, we've seen a lot of ZRAs. And if you look back historically in our term, in the preceding 4-year term, the CAC zoning is really where a lot of density has been pushed in. And the 1 or 2 biggest of those developments, Blue Stream and Etapco at Howard Square, seem to take turns coming back and asking for more exceptions to the existing regulations that allow them to build in more schools. Just last month, the council approved a ZRA that would allow the complete elimination of the commercial component of what's supposed to be a mixed use development. So now it's purely residential. And by some very late filed amendments, a majority of the council approved allowing that elimination of commercial development in every single CIZ across across the county or up and down Route 1, because that's the only place it is. And what that does is have this jarring impact. We ourselves on the council don't know what effect that's going to have. We don't know how many projects are going to result in how many additional residential units versus commercial and how many students that's going to yield. We didn't know that when we approved that bill last month. So there's no way that a school planning agency can have any way of reacting to that. And there's no way that we can pretend as a government that we're prepared to receive those kids and do them good. So this same kind of bill was proposed in Anne Arundel County by the then executive, and the council approved it. It's just to allow the existing planning process, this 10-year vision document, to get into place without having these little kind of pecks at it at the very last end before we basically do away with what was there before and enter into the new plan. And so it's a sunset provision basically on ZRAs and lets everything kind of settle as we look towards the future and whatever this new plan holds for the county.
Thank you, Chair Walsh, for coming. I have a specific question on the council summary. It writes, requiring a specified report related to disclosure of certain contributions and business relationships in the compliance with the Maryland Public Ethics Law. Does that not already happen, or is it just confirming it?
You know, thank you for asking that question, Mr. Khan. It does not already happen. It should happen. Same thing. It's in our state code. It's explicit in our state code. It says before you make an application, you file these disclosures, and it says before the council considers these zoning applications, we get a summary report of those disclosures. And if there's any disclosures made since the initial disclosure was made, you got to update it. That never happens. It's come up before the zoning board, and it resulted in a month-long delay because an applicant kept finding more LLCs that had made donations to more campaign accounts. It's, you know, to some of us, it's a big deal. Land use is big money in this county, and influence, it can be made, it seems like. And so this is to daylight that provision and to put more of an onus on us, the council and county government, to, again, comply with that state law. I thought that would be the non-controversial part of this bill since it's already in state law, but that's the one I get the squawking about.
What it basically is, it's a way for individuals or entities to circumvent the general plan process that we are going into in order to come up with a new general plan, which again is supposed to guide the county in moving forward as to infrastructure and development and so on.
For sure, right? I made a crack at one of our work sessions, which is we're not telling developers and these property owners to go play a board game on the, you know, on their laptop like we tell our constituents. We don't tell them to fill out surveys that don't mention schools until, you know, the 15th screen of a survey. They just have their lawyers file an application and they wait long enough and get the approvals up the chain of custody and then come before the council, and then so far a majority of us approve it. So it definitely seems to be circumventing existing plans, existing regulations, and just this general process that includes everyone in a vision document.
You've done a great job articulating the merits of this. What do you suspect are the biggest impediments or problems with this, or potential problems that you would see if we were to support this and it were eventually passed?
Why none, Ms. Mello?
Okay.
No, it really was, you know, a lot. I obviously came into office with an agenda that had a lot to do with Old Ellicott City, but, you know, the adequate public facilities ordinance, there were some issues that I ran. So we had some good news actually on all those fronts this week. But this literally was proposed to me by Theo, you know, in a conversation where I'm like, what are these things? Why are we like in the midst of all these like one-off changes? Like, this is very time consuming. And to see that Anne Arundel County's executive proposed the same kind of law as they were going through their own general plan process, and that was adopted by the council. The thinking really was this was going to be like a consensus bill, and there really isn't any harm, right? You want to give the processes in place the chance to function as they were intended. So I am not able to articulate for you the downside or the impediment to this. I'm not.
Okay.